welcome to another episode of From the Source. Today we have yet another interview with an exciting guest who comes to us from across the pond, from Holland. Stefan Gaillard is the current secretary for the Libertarian Party in the Netherlands. How are you doing today, Stefan?
Hi, Chris. I'm doing good.
All right. Well, first off, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in libertarianism, and how would you describe your particular political philosophy?
That's an interesting question. I think I've always been leaning towards anarchism ever since I misread Nietzsche, to be honest. And then I moved to a phase in my youth where I became an anarcho-primitivist. We all have our flaws.
Interesting.
Um,
That's a very interesting switch from Nietzsche to anarcho-primitivism, but
yes.
yeah.
And then I read Freud's Civilization and Its Discontent. And in it, he outlines three main factors that inhibit our sense of happiness. And I think I disagree with the happiness part, but you can also easily apply it to things that inhibit our freedom. Those being societal pressures, the frailty of our human body, and the superior power of nature. And that made me move towards more tech optimistic anarchism. And I found that most in right-wing anarchism, so to say. And because I'm also become more of a fan of a transitional phase, I've moved to libertarianism.
Oh, very good. And how did you get involved in the? So would you describe yourself more of like an anarcho-capitalist or a more of a Rothbardian or somewhere around there?
Yeah, I would say that I'm an anarcho-capitalist in sort of the tradition of David Friedman.
Ah, okay, very good. David Friedman was actually the Machinery of Freedom by him was actually the first book that I read in like libertarian. I guess you could consider it philosophy, but it's more practical application, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Cool.
David Friedman's very good. So is his father, Milton, had some very good writings as well too. Not necessarily in the realm of anarchism, but definitely in Chicago School economics for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I also found out that David Friedman also has a son who is also into libertarianism. And
yes,
he's working...
we actually interviewed Patrick
cool.
Friedman quite a while ago. But
I really love the seasteading idea. I'm a big proponent of that.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned Nietzsche because I'm kind of going through, just kind of on a side note here, I'm kind of going through some of Stirner's writings, about egoism, and apparently Nietzsche was pretty influenced by some of Stirner's writings. So I mean, there definitely is a connection there to a form of anarchism, as you could say.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy The Ego in Its Own very much.
I haven't finished it yet, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess you kind of answered the next question of what libertarian authors have inspired you the most. I suppose we could kind of change this around. What are you currently reading, going through right now?
I'm actually rereading Human Action by Mises.
Oh, very good.
Because
that's a heavy.
Yeah, starting a Dutch think tank on praxeology. So
very cool.
That's my main focus now. But I'm also looking towards the different strands of praxeology. I found a Polish strand that's applied a lot within philosophy of technology, but also has links to libertarianism. So I'm trying to find some English translations by a man called Kotorbinski, if I pronounce it correctly. So that's what I'm mainly reading right now.
Okay, very cool. When did you get involved in the the Dutch Libertarian Party?
I got involved in December 2016.
So fairly recently.
Yeah,
There's a that's kind of similar. Have a lot of young people moved towards the movement in the recent years? I know in America, of course, since 2016, we've had a pretty big influx of young people into the party and then into the general movement as well.
yeah, I definitely see a big increase in young people that are joining us. I think that's both because of the general atmosphere, so to say, the political atmosphere among young people, and also because of the new party line that we're running, which is a bit more pragmatic than it used to be, and also more focused on marketing and not solely on the philosophy of libertarianism.
Interesting. So that's kind of one of, if our listeners are kind of familiar, it's kind of one of the criticisms of the American Libertarian Party is that we've become a book club or like
Yeah,
just a debate club or something like that, and we need to concentrate on messaging. And in our most recent podcast that I was on, we were talked about one of our most recent. We talked about messaging in the Libertarian Party and how it can be done effectively. What ways is the Dutch Libertarian Party kind of moving into different forms of messaging to try to attract different people and recruiting and stuff?
we're setting up our first video groups right now. It's something that we haven't done that much in the past. We have had videos, but that were shot by, for example, other journalists, but never really uh, on a substantive basis that we produced our own videos. That's something new that we're trying to do instead of just text-based messaging. We're trying out a combination of memes with our party standpoints, which is surprisingly effective. I was a bit scared at first because, well, Coca-Cola companies, that side of stuff, trying to use memes is always a bit cringy, but they seem to be they seem to be going well. So, and we try to combine it with more informative things so that it's not only that people just like the memes and then move on, but also that there is a connection with that they like the meme, but that they also see what's the logic behind the meme or what kind of standpoints you can connect to what they're seeing.
Right.
Uh,
So it's more of a instead of a passive thing, it's more of a kind of a call to action sometimes, you
yeah,
say?
exactly. And we're also trying to host more events, which are also not only events in which we just discuss things, but also just fun events because we truly believe that you have to create some sort of social bonding with your members for them to even want to become active, for example.
Right. That was something that's kind of taken off within my state party. We kind of realized that, and also, uh, some people who are in the Libertarian Party who, are very concentrating on messaging and trying to get state and local parties to, well, just plan a barbecue,
Yeah, exactly. We're
get,
having our first,
yeah,
one of our first barbecues in a
yeah,
week. So
right, yeah. So that's great. It's definitely that's definitely a inspiring thing to see happen. So I guess for our next question here is, I guess some of our listeners may not be familiar how the political system works in the Dutch government. I mean, how often are elections held? What's kind of the structure? Do people generally vote?
yeah,
Yeah,
okay. So we have um, sort of two types of houses. So the first house and second house, kind of like the Senate and Congress, I think would be the most analogous. Um,
analogous.
analogous.
However that's
Yeah,
pronounced.
exactly.
So a bicameral legislature,
Yeah,
kind of similar to what we have in the United States. Maybe
yeah,
is it parliamentary though?
yeah. So the what's called here the second house is voted in directly. So people vote for candidates which are tied to a party, and then those
Okay.
candidates directly go into the second house, and there are 150 representatives, and there are a huge amount of parties, so it's always a coalition that is ruling. So not a
Okay. Very
two-party
interesting.
system. And then the first chamber, it's a bit convoluted. We actually vote for our provincial representatives, and for our, it's called waterstaten. It's sort of those people who take care of our dikes and our rivers, etc. And that layer chooses the first chamber for some reason. So that is not directly representative.
Hmm. Interesting. So it's a they take care of the dikes and rivers and things like that, and they choose the other members. They choose the other voting class, I guess,
Um,
if I'm catching.
no, the first chamber is chosen by the representatives of the provincial states.
Oh, okay. Very good. Well, that's pretty that's pretty different than what we have in
Yeah,
America here, even the multiple parties. How many parties does the Netherlands have?
um,
Political parties.
actually represented, I think something like 10. I'll quickly check that.
Wow, that's kind of amazing
Yeah.
for such a smaller country. I wouldn't think that the amount of political parties would be anything past five.
It's 13
But
actually. I just checked, and 11 in the first chamber.
oh wow,
Yeah,
that's so you have quite a bit to choose from as a Dutch citizen. From what parties you want to vote for, and do people generally vote party lines, or like if they find a party that they agree with, do they generally just vote down the list and say, oh yeah, if for every position have candidates from this party?
what we used to see in the Netherlands is that people were quite party loyal. So, for
Okay.
example, we have a big Christian Democratic Party, which used to automatically gain almost all of the Christian votes, and same for the party for the laborers. But we're seeing more and more that people are not uh, party loyal anymore, so to speak, and that they haven't decided what they're voting until the last minute. I think that was actually over a quarter of people last election didn't actually know what, weren't sure what they were going to vote until they were in the voting booth. So
Wow. Do you think generally that might be because people are kind of not concerned with politics anymore? They're kind of apathetic to it, and then they're just like, well, I guess I'll make my decision when I get there, kind of thing.
mm, yeah, that's a difficult question because based on that, you would expect the vote turnout to be lower because it's almost always over 70% for the national level.
Oh wow.
So I think that people feel like they have a duty to vote and that they want to enact change, but they're not sure anymore which party is actually trying to enact change and which party is just sort of status quo and won't do that much.
Hmm. So you mentioned the Democratic Christian
Yeah.
Party. Is that generally like people who are generally more conservative stances on things? Uh,
Yeah, you could.
it sounds
They are
it
center
sounds like a
right.
conservative party.
They are center right conservatives, I would say.
Oh, okay. Very cool. And then the Labor Party almost even sounds like are those. I would imagine those are like the two major parties you kind of mentioned that almost even sounds like our Democratic Party too.
Yeah, the Labour
So
Party used to be quite big. It actually took I think its biggest loss in its history last election.
okay,
Uh, they literally went to like a third of their original size, something like that. So now actually the Socialist Party, for example, is bigger than them.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And the biggest party is the sort of the Liberal Party, I would say. Although there has been a lot of critique that that the term liberal isn't that appropriate anymore, since they're having quite a lot of conservative standpoints. And with conservative, I
Interesting.
mean as in um, government mandated conservative standpoints. Because I mean, as a libertarian, you can also be conservative, of course. But uh,
Right. You can be, conservative in your social life,
exactly,
and live a conservative lifestyle. Like I'm pretty conservative in, how I live and things like that, and you can go to church and things.
yeah,
But yeah, but the conservative, how you mean is kind of social, like social controls or like mandates or things like that
yeah,
that
exactly. Like the
people.
criminalization of drug usage. You can be
Right.
conservative and
Yeah.
against drugs usage while still thinking that it should be legal for people.
Right. Very true. I guess that kind of brings me to it kind of is a good segue to one of the other questions I had, which was, what are some current laws, bills, or political happenings in the Netherlands, that your Libertarian Party is opposed to right now, or some ideas that are coming forth that you guys are against?
Um, there's been quite a lot of ruckus, so to say, around our um, what's it called? Like when you end somebody's life. I can't think of the word right now.
Oh,
Yeah, our
euthanasia.
euthanasia laws, which are quite
Yeah,
liberal compared
voluntary
to other
euthanasia.
countries.
Okay.
Um, but there was talk of making it the options more make the options wider, so to speak. Um, but the coalition had some internal struggles over that, and that didn't really come to pass. So that's one thing that's a shame. And also, we are having a new law which um, gives our secret police, so to say, yeah, it's sort of our secret police version, the Dutch version, more power to, for example, when somebody is suspected of a crime, they can now tap into the whole area that criminal lives in instead of only tapping the criminal himself.
Oh, so their
Yeah,
phones?
for
They're like phones
example,
and
their
their
phones and their
internet?
internet.
Wow.
Um, and that was combined. Yeah, that and people weren't that happy about that, and that was also combined with a referendum because we had. I'll come back to that. Referenda in the Netherlands, but they're not binding. They're just to give advice. And so there was a referendum on that law to give more power to our secret police. And then the majority of the Netherlands said, we don't think that this new law in its current state is a good idea. But they disregarded that advice. And now they've also removed the referendum. So the whole referendum system is now gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That wiretapping does not sound something that is very libertarian at all, and
No.
it's something that kind of we are in a way that we're kind of seeing in the United States a little bit, where even in some of the major cities there was a bill that was passed, and that people who live above the subways, so
Yeah.
like in apartment buildings above the subways,
Mm-hmm.
that's technically able to be searched at any time because it's above public property. And of course it's crazy.
Wow.
And also of course there's the NSA wiretapping, of course. Um, so the does the I was doing a little bit of research before this interview, and I noticed that there is a Dutch constitution, and do you guys have a form of Bill of Rights? Is there certain rights that are recognized by the government, and how much does the LP there line up with, or do they hold those in high regard, or do they lean on those when they're trying to pass certain bills or get certain people elected?
Yeah, we do have a constitution, but it's less of a big deal, so to say, as compared to the United States. Um, of course, there are some things in the constitution that we hold very dear, such as the freedom of speech. Um, but we usually try to base our standpoints not so much on the constitution, but more on both libertarian philosophy and pragmatism. So, as long as our standpoints are more libertarian than the most freedom loving party in government, then we're moving towards more freedom. That's our philosophy. And also, the constitution in itself is, I would say, not the best tool for libertarian, because then you're still um, adhering to sometimes arbitrary uh, rules that don't always converge with trying to maximize freedom. For example, I think in the U.S., because how your constitution is set up, that converges more than in the Netherlands.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying, that it's um, that if you're giving credence to this document and saying, well, yes, this is liberty, then it kind of it restricts your room to move, but you're more concerned about moving moving the needle of moving the needle towards
Yeah,
liberty, as kind of a common phrase in some libertarian circles here. You're more concerned about moving the government in the right direction, rather than taking, no, it's the Constitution or
yeah,
nothing kind
exactly.
of
But
thing.
also, I
Yeah.
think uh, your constitution is perhaps more libertarian than ours is. So that is also a big factor in that if we would move to a constitutional government, that would be indeed a big step forward, but that would still conflict with some of libertarian ideology in the way our constitution is set up.
Well, that's kind of a similar. There's some people that hold that in a similar idea here too. That if the government has gotten as big as it has, and it has gotten as tyrannical as it has, then then some people may say that the Constitution might have been flawed, might have not prevented that, and so there you know there are some that argue that if we get to a constitutional republic again, then it's a huge step. But there's others that will come back and say, well, then what's to prevent the government from getting big
Yeah, I
again,
think I agree with
and
both
getting.
positions because it can still be a big step, and you can recognize uh, that you should continue moving after that big step because, indeed, as you say, uh, you can recognize that it used to be better, but not perfect. So that if we move towards that, then we can look at, can we still improve upon that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to move towards it and kind of say, hey, this was good, but it's definitely not the ideal. But if we can get there, then we can
Yeah.
get there. Then it's good. Um, okay, moving on here a little bit. What occupies your time when you're not engaged in work with the Libertarian Party? What tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you like to do in your free time?
Um. So
You go to school? You go to
sorry.
university? do you go to university? Do you go to school?
Yeah, I'm affiliated with the University of Utrecht, um, where I study, I do research, and uh, I do some student assistant jobs. Next to that, I'm also, well, last year I was the treasurer of the debating board of the city I live in. So I'm
Oh wow.
debating a lot, going to debate tournaments in some weekends. I'm going to the European Debating Championships in Serbia this month. Um, so that's both a hobby and also a tactical decision because I think that um, debating is a skill that some libertarians are lacking in. In particular, trying to appeal to emotions instead of only logic, for example.
That's very true. Not just in libertarians, but I feel like that's kind of a dark spot on the political
Yeah,
sphere in general.
true.
But
So that I read a lot. Um, I tried to fitness, although this year it was a bit less than expected. And as I said, I'm currently starting a think tank, which I'm very much excited for.
oh yeah, you mentioned that earlier. That's sounds amazing. Do you ever plan on running for office?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as well lately because I both love like scientific research, but also politics, which is why the think tank was perfect for me, combining those two interests. But I do think when I'm quite a bit older, for example, in my 40s, I would like to run for office. But I do think it would be very good to have quite a lot of private sector experience before I move into government.
That's a very I think that's something that might be a little bit underrated is that people like especially I think within the American Libertarian Party, so people get very on fire about politics and debating and things like in philosophy and things like that. But I think that you have to look at the other people, like people that are running that are successful politicians are usually successful businessmen, or in their field, or doctors, or in their field
Yeah,
they're very successful. I mean, Ron Paul, for
yeah, I think
example, was
that's
very
indeed
doctor.
both a networking thing, like having the right connections, knowing how to raise money, etc. But also, I think that as a libertarian representative within politics, you should have a clear idea of not only um, like the private sector on a theoretical basis, but also on a practical basis, that you know which are the problems that people actually come into contact with most on a daily basis. Where does most of the frustration lie? I think that that is best experienced and not just read about.
Very, very true. You need to be able to connect with your
Yeah,
voters. You need to be able to connect with your constituents. Yeah, and on a personal level, not just say, "Oh, well, I think I know that people do this job, and it might be difficult in this
yeah,
way." you know, it's people want politicians that are going to be able to connect with them on a personal level, and then be able to understand their struggles, so that way that you can bring them more freedom, and secure their liberties, and work towards
yeah.
them. So yeah, that's a very good goal to have. So next question is pretty simple. I think you'll be able to answer it. Is that is taxation theft?
uh, yes, either that or what's it called? Robbery. Yeah, I think there's
Robbery?
a
Yes,
slight
yes.
semantic difference there. So depending on which,
Murray Rothbard was called
yeah,
it robbery. Yeah. So
I do, I do.
um,
Oh,
reason
sorry.
kind of.
I do definitely
No, go
think
ahead.
that
Sorry.
um, it's a form of institutionalized robbery. But I try to avoid using that term in non-libertarian circles, but also in our marketing, for example. So now on a libertarian podcast, of course. But I think that it is a term that is used a bit too much in libertarian circles. I think that, for example, if you're trying to convince people to your side, then taxation is theft is a phrase that will sort of shock people. Like if you look at cognitive dissonance psychology, then people don't like to hear things that do not stroke with their current worldview. And then coming with taxation is theft is quite a big thing that doesn't stroke with many people's worldview. So tactically not the best.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that before, and that and it's kind of I think it's a better idea to not necessarily lead off with that,
Yeah.
and because it's if you say okay, it's true that taxation is theft, taxation is robbery, but to most people they're like, well, I don't care though, because they see that they're getting, they're getting certain things from it. They're still in this mentality like, well, I'm paying for roads, I'm paying for healthcare, I'm paying for the defense,
Yeah,
things like
exactly.
that.
They
So
they
I
either don't see
you
it
know
as
I
theft,
don't care that it's
or
going away.
sometimes they do see it as theft, but then they say, "But I think other things are more important," even though I acknowledge that it's on a technical level theft.
Right. That that we need it for certain things. You can't have a government without a little bit of coercion, without a little bit of
Yeah.
theft. And so and I'm not saying those are valid arguments. I'm just saying that to most people it doesn't connect with them on an
No,
emotional
exactly.
level. They're perfectly fine with giving up a couple, giving up a portion of their salary to
Yeah.
have these things, and they don't realize that you could have these things without being forced into
So
it.
the only people you're connecting
Yeah.
with are the other libertarians, which you've hopefully already convinced to your side, who are the hardcore libertarians who refuse to vote, and then party wise also aren't your biggest allies, even though in other areas they certainly are.
Right. Um, yeah, that's a very good point. And kind of why I asked that, because there was a viral video that was going around.
Yes.
You know what I'm gonna say. A viral video going around about a year ago, and it was Tony Manders, who's I believe was the founder of the Libertarian Party in the Netherlands,
Twan
correct?
Manders. Yes, he was very very much a part of the party being set up. That's correct. Yes.
And that was, I believe, in
Yeah. Correct.
1993, correct? It was relatively new. I mean, the American Libertarian Party was founded in 1971, and we consider that
Yeah,
to be
and we
new,
also had like
And
sort of
so,
hibernation periods. So if you look at the actual active years of our party, we are quite young.
oh yeah. But if our listeners haven't seen this video, he gives a pretty brilliant explanation of why
Yeah.
taxation is theft, and it's one of the better ones that I've seen. And even if you don't speak Dutch, it's watch it with subtitles
Yeah.
because it's good. Um, have you had an opportunity to work with him in the
Yes, I
past?
have worked with Twan. Indeed, he was on the previous board, so I have had contact with him on general assemblies, but also I went to a meetup of the International Alliance of Libertarian Parties a few months ago in Prague. He was also there,
Oh wow.
and also as a friend, I sometimes see him, and I met him and James Payne, a American professor who came to the Netherlands. You know
Yes.
him? Yeah.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
I haven't met him. No. Yeah. Well, that's very cool. So the International Alliance of Libertarians.
of
is that
libertarian
what that
parties.
was?
Yes,
The Libertarian
IALP.
parties. Wow, very cool. How was that conference or that meeting?
It was good. It was mostly sort of getting all the statutory changes out of the way. So in that regard, that wasn't too exciting. But like the networking, sorry, around that was very interesting. And good to see people from Spain, Belgium, France.
So so all of these nations libertarian parties you kind of like work together in concert to set up party platforms, or kind of is that kind of what the
Yeah, we're
purpose of it
trying
is?
to set up an international platform, um, so that
Oh wow.
if people, for example, in countries without a libertarian party, try to look for libertarian things, that then they can come upon this international platform, for example. But also for things like the European elections, it can be handy for the European parties to work together in some aspects. For example, create a video together with different subtitles or with different voiceovers. So that's the general idea.
Right. Right, because that can be kind of a hurdle over there, because it's lots of different languages and different things like that, and different issues to focus on too, because a lot of the countries have separate sets of laws and different ways their
Yeah,
government
exactly.
works,
It's
and
different for
you know,
each European
right,
country, and also the hurdles are bigger in some countries. Like for example, the some countries you have to get a certain percentage of the vote before you can even get a seat. That's that. I mean, that's in all countries, but there's a bigger percentage for that first seat, so to say.
oh, okay. So like for a party to
Yeah,
kind of break the
exactly.
ice, so to speak, you would have to gain a bigger percentage than you
For yeah,
normally would.
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
The costs associated with, for example, in the Netherlands, it costs 11,000 euros to participate in national elections. Um, so things like
Okay.
that are um, so we have different hurdles, but also in a way they resemble each other. So it's good to exchange ideas and also practical tips. I'm very much a fan of the more practical side. So for example, um, the party in Belgium has relatively a lot of members. How do they do that? In Spain, their think tank is relatively successful. How did they do that? So just look what are successful areas and can we apply those strategies somewhere else?
Right, absolutely. And I mean, that's kind of, it's similar to what the national LP kind of does in the United States is, there might be one state that's very, very good at marketing and, towards towards certain people, or that might be very good at social media, and then, oh, how do you do that? And there's all this networking that goes into it. And I um recently just came back from the national
Yeah,
convention, and of course I definitely empathize with you of the business meetings and the bylaws discussions, and all that. It
yeah,
gets really tiring after
exactly.
a while. Very, very tiring. So yeah, but the networking opportunities are
Yeah,
just amazing, and if you know it, we have also like conventions in the United States that aren't business related, and it's all about like what we are talking about earlier, like setting up those fun events that people can go to, and it's kind of a no
yeah, that's
pressure
what we're
thing.
also trying to
Oh,
move.
you like
Yeah,
freedom? Come to this, thing
that's
like
what we're
that.
trying to move towards
Yeah.
with our national assemblies as well. We just shortened the business period and try to get voting done as much beforehand online, for example, so that we can increase the portion of the day that's spent on getting to know new members exchanging ideas with each other, having some fun lectures that are also not too long, things like that.
Right. Um, is there any movement kind of in the libertarianism in Europe and then also in the Netherlands, kind of associated with cryptocurrency? I know the crypto community is really taking off in the United States in the libertarian circles. Is there a presence there in like with crypto
Yeah,
markets and things like
definitely.
that?
Many of our party members are into cryptocurrency. And we used to think it was like a one-way street, so to say, but I recently found out that some of our newer members actually got into libertarianism through cryptocurrency. So they got into cryptocurrency first, and then they heard about libertarianism in those circles, and then they moved to our party. So I'm very much a fan of that interaction on that level. Uh,
That's also very prevalent here. You know, there's a lot of people that have moved towards the Libertarian Party or to just libertarian thought in
yeah,
general just
it's
because of
actually
it.
funny. A sort of center-left journal here, and it's a very good journal, to be honest. The Groene Amsterdammer wrote an article about the disturbing link between cryptocurrency and libertarianism. Yeah, yeah.
So disturbing. Watch out. The boogeyman libertarians are going to try to take over the country so they can all leave you
Exactly.
alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, we're coming up kind of on, about 45 minutes here. Um, I was going to ask you, what was your favorite
Yeah.
libertarian quote?
Um, I have it before me, so I don't misquote him. It's by Frederik Bastiat. I hope he counts as a libertarian. We
Oh, yes,
object
he
to a
does.
state enforced equality. Then they say that we are against equality, and so on and so on. It is as if the socialists were to accuse us of not wanting persons to eat because we do not want the state to raise grain. I think that perfectly combines my sort of inner lefty, like lefty as in I want, um, like the community idea is something that I very much enjoy personally, but without state intervention. So, for example, a quote unquote communist community that would be completely voluntary to join. So, like some of the mini cities in Scandinavia, where you just join a community and then you share everything with each other. I think that's very noble. That's something that I might want to do in the future. But those do not take forcibly the property of other people. And so,
I'm very very much a fan of that idea as well. I mean, I don't know if I would personally do it, but I really like the idea. I was actually looking into late earlier this year. There was you said in Scandinavia there was an idea like this called
yeah,
Liberstad in southern um,
yeah,
southern Norway, and I thought it was a very cool idea, but it wasn't necessarily communist because the idea was that they would have
mm,
an internal economy, kind of based on cryptocurrency. It was more like
yeah,
anarcho-capitalist probably, but somewhere around there. But I like the I think that's kind of a neat. I really empathize with that idea, and if people want to voluntarily associate and things like that, and when we have a deregulated society, then
yeah,
that's fine. The sense of community is something that people are very drawn to, and I think saying no, like no, that's not real libertarianism
yeah,
is
exactly. I think
pretty
that's one of
asinine.
the things that's sometimes a bit forgotten or glossed over, that you can still have these types of societies uh, within the larger
Right.
context of a libertarian one.
Yeah. Bastiat is one of my absolute favorites. I really like Bastiat. The Law is one of those, I feel like, is one of those books that it's short enough and it's it speaks in a way that people can connect with it enough that I feel like a normal
Yeah.
person could read it and get interested in libertarianism. Not normal person. I mean, the average person could read it and get interested in
Yeah.
libertarianism afterwards, or at least think that
Mhm.
it's a nice sentiment. You know, um, he just had a way
Yeah.
with words.
I was
And
thinking of
it's
I was thinking for a while
very
of
good.
quoting Michel Foucault because it angers both left people as well as right wing people to call him a libertarian, but also just
Uh,
quotability wise, I went with Bastiat.
Well, it kind of relates to current events here because Cody Wilson, who just was in the news recently for his acquittal from
Yeah.
his court case. He if you're familiar with he made the first 3D
Yes.
printed
Yes.
gun and wanted to distribute the CAD files. He's a big fan of Michel
Nice.
Foucault, and yeah, and he considers himself a crypto anarchist. So that's
Yes. Actually, I I thought like maybe I won't introduce too much terms, but crypto anarchy is actually what I would identify more with than anarcho capitalism.
oh,
But
okay. It's
that's
it's kind of in that same
yeah,
same mode of thought, similar
true.
philosophers and things like that, But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll definitely read more into him then. That
he's a pretty interesting
sounds
dude.
like we're on the same page.
He's a pretty interesting dude. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he's very much some of the things that he said is like I don't want to try to get down the rabbit hole too much, but some of the things are even more of like the on the egoist side of it, of like if people have to seize their own freedom and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah. I think the connection between Stirner and more right-wing anarchism is also very interesting
it is.
and not much explored.
Yeah. Well, so is there anything else you'd like to mention, or even questions that you would like to ask me before we kind of wrap things up here?
Um, yeah, I'm curious to your thoughts between um, about the current state of libertarianism in the United States, like concerning the last elections and how you move forward from that.
So the last presidential elections is what you're okay.
Yeah,
Well, so what's really interesting about the last presidential race is even though that the Libertarian Party, if you look at the numbers, it didn't they you would say, well, they didn't necessarily do very well. But one
yeah,
one of the things that was gained from it was ballot access for states. We got a certain percentage to be able to get ballot access for states' libertarian parties, and that's one of the reasons why we need to run a presidential election or nominee. That being said, I don't think I'm going to kind of agree with quite a few libertarians. This isn't uh, a controversial idea, but I don't think Gary Johnson was the best choice. I don't
mm-hmm.
think that I I think that that yes, he was very libertarian in some ways, and he was very pragmatic in some ways, but um, he just had this unsure attitude about him. It wasn't someone who inspires, a leadership and like that a president should. And I know that's kind of statist for me to
Yeah,
say, but you're running for that position, so you should be able to fulfill, fill the boots of the position.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so the last presidential election, between the race between Hillary and Trump, um, that kind of created a different way in which politics was talked about. It was very much became a
Yeah,
part of the internet, became a part of memes, became a part of
mm,
people doing podcasts, things like that, and that just has exploded. Not just in the United States, but like everywhere else. Um,
yeah,
so I think that's one of the things that has changed is that we've become more digitized in our politics, and I think that the Libertarian Party would do well to in America would do well to take advantage of this, and
yeah,
start getting into the different social media platforms like Steemit, which is crypto based.
Yeah,
social media and things like that.
especially if Zuckerberg is gonna run.
Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah, it
scary.
sounds funny, but I mean, yeah, then it would be very good for the Libertarian Party, for example, to at least be able to give some sort of uh, counter leverage on the social media platforms.
Very true. Yeah. Well,
So before we wrap up, can I do one? I mean, I am a capitalist after all, so I would just quickly like to pitch why the Netherlands is one of the best countries for rich American libertarians to invest in.
oh, very good. Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Because I've looked at the numbers, and in the US, you have to spend like millions and millions to get like 3% of the vote. I think 3.2% or something like that. 3.7% of the votes you got.
Mm-hmm.
In the Netherlands, for that same amount of percentage, you already have 2 seats because we have a different system. So you could actually have libertarian representatives in the Dutch government, and with far less money. Like if we have 200,000 euros, we calculated which amount of money new party spent. It's around 150,000 euros for each seat. So with 300,000 euros, we could have 2 elected libertarians in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is relatively liberal economics wise and also social wise. So you can also use it as a sort of gateway to the rest of the world. Like, see, this country is moving towards libertarianism and it's doing very well economically and socially.
Wow, that's very encouraging. So if you guys are looking to invest into a libertarian party abroad, not just in the United States, give the Netherlands a look because that sounds very promising. So
Exactly.
yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Stefan.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, liberty is truly something that goes beyond borders and is worldwide. Thank you for all you do in the Libertarian Party in the Netherlands. Um, so, also to wrap it up here, don't forget to pick up your T-shirt. Only $15 on Amazon and for a limited time. And of course, you can always find Think Liberty on all the social media platforms. Facebook.com is /Think Liberty. Instagram at Think Liberty, one word. On Steemit at Think-Liberty. On Minds and Twitter at Think_Liberty. Check out our website at thinkliberty.com for articles and Liberty swag, and soundcloud.com/think-liberty for this and all our other podcast channels. Well, I think it's time we're going to say goodbye, or as they say in the Netherlands,
Doei.
Doei.
Yes, it's quite underwhelming.
Yes. I thought it was vaarwel, but
yeah, that's a bit formal.
it's a bit formal. Well, yeah. Goodbye anyway to all you lovers out there.